Welcome back, everyone. Well, any of you been following these series on technology that we've been doing with Anais and Associates? I think that you find the same thing that I'm finding is that they're so productive. It's so interesting to learn about this stuff on really two fronts. A sense of experience, which is really important because all of us in our own businesses are involved in so many different things. And then, as I found with Ray, the ability to communicate the information to the end user. So joining me again is Ray Appy, who is the President and CEO of Anais and Associates. Welcome, Ray.
Thanks, Jesse. Good to be back again.
Yeah, good to have you back. We've been covering all kinds of stuff, but one of the issues that I really want to go back on, and we've talked a bit about it in different sessions, is the whole idea of assessment. Because it really plays into what I opened with, experience and communicating with a client.
Yes.
So let's go from step one, assessment. What is an assessment in your world?
Okay. Well, you could think of it as like a technology audit. It is a snapshot. It produces a report that's valid for that point in time and usable for some short time thereafter. But it's something that should be repeated. It is a process and it should be repeated on some regular basis. And what we find is that clients that we work most closely with, we're able to do that, and then we find others that don't do that on a regular basis. But what actually is it? In our world, an assessment for technology starts with their business. So it's really understanding what does the client do for the business, why are they in business, what's their mission, how do they make money if they're trying to make money, how do they take care of people if they're healthcare, whatever the case may be, what's their mission, and then what technology applications do they use to execute on that mission. And then we start to prioritize those applications from mission critical to maybe the mid-tier to the less important applications. And then we start to look underneath that, what runs those applications and how does information flow, how do they operate, where do they operate, how do users use those applications, whether they're related to the voice system, data systems, video systems, whatever the case may be, all of the above. So it's really defining the business first and then all the technology that sits underneath it. But what we really dive into as we get into the process is just the gory details about, how old is every piece of equipment that they're using, how old are the revisions of software and the operating systems that they're running on, are they all patched up and up to date, do they have the appropriate security patches installed or not, and what's missing from the equation. And even when we walk into the most well-run technology shops, we always find things that they didn't know about.
Right.
So the assessment has a lot of value for the customer because it enlightens them on things that they didn't know about. And I think an important thing to consider is that as a technology solution provider, we live in that world of dealing with those areas of technology that are in our core competencies every day. Whereas an IT director and that IT director staff may not be dealing with those things all the time as a solution provider does. So my advice would be to find a qualified shop that focuses on, it's similar to if you wanted to put an addition on your house. You're going to find a qualified builder that puts additions on all the time because that's what they're really good at. Or you're going to find a plumber to do plumbing, you're going to find an electrician who's certified to do electrical work. Same kind of thing. You want to try to find an organization that really focuses in those areas. But what we come out of from that assessment report, it's from the top down and the bottom up, everything from cabling infrastructure and power and facilities and cooling in the data center and temperature humidity control, all those things all the way up through the user's experience and the applications that they're using and how everything works in between. So that's what an assessment, it's top down and bottom up and all the details. And we produce a report and provide that report to the customer. And quite honestly, as I said, it's a snapshot. It's only valid for a certain period of time and then it's out of date again within months, and that's just the way it is because technology is evolving and changing constantly.
Right. Ray, before we went on the air, I said to Ray, well, we do it annually. And Ray started laughing and he was like, technology, the advances in technology, but also just keeping up to date on things. Does require perhaps a little more than once a year, you think?
Yes. Well, it kind of depends on your business. I would say at least once a year, depending on the business. And for some organizations, it should be done monthly.
Wow.
If security is super important and compliance, like if you're in healthcare, it's HIPAA compliance. If you're in banking, there are other regulations you have to be compliant with. Security audits and assessments and overall technology assessments should be done more often. Absolutely.
Well, you know what? You're really hitting on so many of these points. But one of the questions I want to ask you, all right, so from your experience and your ability to communicate with your clients, what do you see most often when you do an assessment? There must be a common thread here somewhere.
Well, I think most often the things that we find most frequently would be, for example, we find equipment that's still running and maybe operating some critical aspect of the business that's relying upon it, but it's out not only out of date, but it's end of life from the manufacturer. It's end of support. In other words, it's no longer supported. It really should have been replaced a year or two ago, you know, or something like that. And you know, we find people say, well, it's still running. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But the question is, you know, now you're relying, a critical aspect of your business is relying on this piece of equipment that's no longer supported. You can't even get software updates for it anymore. So that's one thing, is out of date products, right? That's a big one. Another big one is mismanagement, or maybe that's not a fair word, because it's tough to keep up with everything. But we find equipment and applications that are out of date with regards to critical security and operating patches from the manufacturer. You know, we might find a client who thinks they have, well, we have this application is really slow. There's something wrong with this piece of software, or it's my darn computer. Why is this thing so slow? And through the assessment process, we might find that, well, it actually has nothing to do with the application of your computer. There's a switch or a router somewhere in your network that probably should have had a code update a year and a half ago. You know, and when we make these tweaks over here, all of a sudden the network is optimized again, and your traffic is flowing better. So it's code patches, security patches that have been missed, or things that have fallen out of date as it relates to manufacturers' operating system and application codes. The other thing we find frequently is just misconfigured equipment in the network, because everything, to put an enterprise network together, every piece of equipment in that network has a somewhat of a customized configuration on it. So a programmer actually works on that equipment to get it up and running. And those things need to be maintained as well, you know, because things change over time. You might add a new application, you might add some new equipment into the network, and now all of a sudden the way everything's interacting is a little bit different.
Right.
The manufacturer may have published code updates several times in the last 2 years, and you know, oh, it's just a switch in the network. I didn't really pay attention to that. Well, you missed some code updates, and now you're not operating efficiently. You may have a gaping security hole that you weren't aware of. Whatever the case may be. So those are the kind of things that we find most often. End of life, mismanagement of code, and misconfigured equipment in the network.
Right. You know, again, before we went on air, Ray and I were talking, and you know, there are updates from manufacturers that you don't even know about. I mean, you may have gotten notification of it or something, but you know, in the daily course of running your business, you don't really pay attention to it, or it goes by, or whatever. And of course, it does have a real effect on the ability of your network to operate it at its optimum. Well, you certainly gave me the topic for next week. We're going to talk about life cycle next week.
Oh, okay. We were going to do that a while ago. We never got back to that one, so I'm glad that's
You're not supposed to
again.
remind me of that. But life cycle and life cycle costs.
That's really important, yeah. Because when you look at anything, you got to look at what not just what it's going to cost me to buy this now. What's it going to be over time until the thing is useless, until the point in time when it's no longer of use.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, Ray, boy, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to have to watch this like 6 times to catch up to everything you said. But I'll see you next week, and we'll talk about life cycle costs.
Very good. Thanks, Jesse.
Sure. To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.